with a presidential administration here in America, seemingly determined to do everything, everywhere, and all at once, discerning its true priorities can sometimes be challenging. But on one point, President Trump wanted no ambiguity. "My promise to Jewish Americans is this," he said on the campaign trail. "With your vote, I will be your defender, your protector, and I will be the best friend Jewish Americans have ever had in the White House." On Purim, we read from the Scroll of Esther, a narrative disguised as cartoonish parody. This is the story of an indulgent, narcissistic king, Ahasuerus, a man with unlimited power and unlimited wealth. He is rash and reckless. Under the king's leadership, one advisor, Haman, has been granted privilege in the king's court. This is a man with, as one scholar writes, a bottomless need to punish those whom he perceives have punished him by not showing appropriate obsequiousness. One day, Mordecai the Jew fails to approach Haman as deferentially as Haman demands, and Haman, slighted by a Jew, determines that he must now take revenge on all the Jews because, well, that's how racism works. And the result is catastrophic. The story is sardonic, but the themes and questions raised by the book of Esther are essential. To read of the vulnerability of the Jews of Shushan, we must ask, what is the fate of the Jew in the diaspora? What are the perils of Jewish powerlessness? And reading the revenge fantasy of chapter 9 of the book of Esther, when the Jews kill 75,811 people, we are faced with another critical question for another day. What are the dangers inherent in Jewish power? Last Rosh Hashanah, I spoke about how universities fell into a moral quagmire of their own making, failing to offer clear guidelines and protocols that would honor the right to protest and free speech while keeping all the students safe. Jewish students were gaslit by well-intentioned people whose worldview seemed to be dependent on minimizing or denying the reality of anti-Semitism in the university because it clashed with their rigid worldview and hierarchy of suffering. So thankfully, finally, someone is saying that it's not right for Jewish students to be threatened and marginalized and kicked out of clubs. Finally, someone is objecting to classes being disrupted, dorms flyered with jackboots stomping on Jewish stars, and images of machine guns with the words, "The enemy will be eliminated." Finally, someone willing to offer unequivocal condemnation for students met out of their way out of Shabbat dinner with the saying, "Go back to Poland." And yet, I don't find full comfort in the Trump administration's embrace of my people, on college campuses or elsewhere. Jew hatred is real, but today's anti-Semitism isn't simply a legitimate effort to fight it. It's a cover for a wide range of agendas that have nothing to do with the welfare of the Jewish people. All of these agendas, from dismantling basic government functions to crushing the independence of cultural and educational organizations, to criminalizing political speech, to legitimating petty presidential vendettas, endanger the principles and institutions that have made this country great. For Jews, a number of these agendas do something more. They pose a direct threat to the very people they purport to help. Jews who applaud the administration's crackdown may soon find that they do so at their own peril. Among the first high-profile targets of the anti-Semitism push were a recent Columbia graduate and a current Tufts University graduate student, one a lawful permanent resident of this country, and the other one here on a student visa, who spoke out in favor of Palestinian rights. Both were handcuffed, driven off, and indefinitely detained. Neither was charged with a crime. Arrests by government agents, unexplained indefinite detentions, the targeting of allegedly dangerous ideas, lists of those under government scrutiny, official proclamations full of bluster and bile. Jews have been there before, many times, and it does not ultimately bode well for us. The rule of law and the right to freedom of thought and expression are essential safeguards for everyone, but especially for members of groups whose ideas or practices don't always align with the mainstream. The Trump administration has announced it will investigate diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at more than 50 schools, cut hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding from such institutions as Johns Hopkins and the University of Pennsylvania, has sought to deport international students involved in pro-Palestinian activism. Colombia received a letter from the federal government issuing demands, which included making changes to discipline and admission policies and placing the Department of Middle East, Southern Asia, and African Studies under academic receivership to be met as a precondition for negotiating the restoration of $400 million in federal funding. As for the president himself, he declared that Senator Chuck Schumer is not Jewish anymore. Leo Terrell, the head of Mr. Trump's anti-Semitism task force, shared a tweet by a prominent white supremacist that lauded the president's ability to revoke, quote, someone's Jew card. I've spoken to Jews who are shocked by anti-Israel attitudes on campus. They are shocked by how many progressives decry ethno-states, but somehow mention only Israel, or how readily people, when given half a chance, will express what the historian Deborah Lipstadt has called clueless anti-Semitism. Political events seem to expand their license to do so. If you feel righteous about being an anti-colonialist, why worry about a little anti-Semitism? Like the white supremacists liberated by mainstream anti-DEI language, these anti-Semites hear perfectly legitimate criticism of, say, the Israeli government and regard it as an opportunity to unfurl the true extent of their prejudice. Given all this, there's a great temptation for Jews to embrace anyone who denounces anti-Semitism, regardless of the moral contradictions or the dubious connections between protecting religious minorities and, say, cutting grants for cancer research. The Anti-Defamation League posted in response to the detention of Mahmoud Khalil that we appreciate the Trump administration's broad, bold set of efforts to counter campus anti-Semitism. And this further action illustrates that resolve by holding alleged perpetrators responsible for their actions. Some American Jewish organizations have encouraged the erosion of rights and norms in exchange for support of Israel. The president hadn't been in office a full day before the Anti-Defamation League spoke up to defend Elon Musk for throwing what sure looked like a Sieg Heil. After weathering intense criticism over its support for Mr. Khalil's abduction, the organization's chief executive restated the need for due process. How did we get to the point where that's even in doubt? Kingsley Wilson, the 20-something deputy press secretary at the Pentagon, praised the far-right party Alternative for Germany by invoking the Nazi slogan, Ausländer raus, foreigners out. As the traditional conservatives at the Bulwark put it, the vibe shift is not necessarily that more people on the right are anti-Semites compared to 8 years ago, but that much of the right now appears to reject the basic notion that there should be any stigma against even the vilest bigotry. That's why the instrumentalization of Jewish fear is so pernicious. Those who attack people like Mr. Khalil today will be breaking bread with the Ausländer raus folks tomorrow, and they will seek new targets. In the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE, the Jewish kingdom of Judea aligned itself with Rome to protect itself from the domination of Greek culture. Rome obliged and conquered Judea for itself. The enemy of our enemy was not our friend. There's a lesson there if we heed it. And here's another lesson from Pirkei Avot, the compilation of rabbinic ethical teachings. Be cautious with governments, it says, for they bring a person close to them only for their own needs. They appear as friends when it benefits them, but they do not stand by a person in his time of difficulty. Some Jewish people feel gratified to hear the president say he'll defend us, but today's ruling authorities may not always be good for the Jews. In an interview, Michael Roth, the president of Wesleyan University, said that people have said to him, well, you take all that money from the government, why don't you listen to them? The answer, he said, is because the money doesn't come with a loyalty oath. And that has served the country so well because Americans and various governments we've had recognize that it's better for the country if people can practice freedom. The government's not going to tell you how to run your business, and it starts with universities because universities are this object of resentment and this kind of weird charisma, negative and positive. It starts with that, but it could easily go into other aspects of the culture that, again, depend on the government. Universities and their free inquiry are part of a sector of our culture that is worth preserving, from the Kennedy Center to the Smithsonian to churches and synagogues. Autonomy of these different areas, even if they're entangled economically with the government, is so important. Roth states that while the anti-Semitic biases emanating from the far left are, in his opinion, dangerous and very real, the Trump administration's assault on our nation's leading academic institutions under the banner of fighting anti-Semitism is also deeply problematic and frightening. As Rabbi Sharon Brous expressed, we the Jews are being used to advance a political agenda that will cause grave harm to the social fabric and to the institutions that are best suited to protect Jews and all minorities. We are being used. Our pain, our trauma is being exploited to eviscerate the dream of a multiracial democracy while advancing the goal of a more white and Christian nation. For those familiar with the anti-Semitic playbook, it comes as no surprise that intolerant rulers are championing the seemingly just and righteous cause of protecting Jews from discrimination, but in fact are using this issue to advance an anti-democratic agenda. This strategy of punishing institutions for not protecting Jews while arresting and disappearing foreign students who have publicly protested places the purported well-being of the Jewish community in opposition to the well-being of other minority groups, creating a favorite group to be more protected than others. Under the guise of protecting us, this administration is ripping support away from institutions and undermining legal precedents intended to support all minorities, and in fact, all Americans to flourish equally. To the degree that Jews appear to be favored, Jews are centered as targets of rage and frustration from others who are watching their own safety being dramatically eroded. These are the venerable tactics of anti-Semitism. The Jews are set up as the reason for the erosion of other people's rights. The Jews once again become the scapegoat, the target of blame for the disenfranchised. We find ourselves forced into the arms of the ruling power for our safety and protection. In the guise of protecting us, the governing powers isolate us from our fellow citizens. But history teaches us that this safety is ephemeral. It will last only as long as we Jews are useful to their goals. A disconnect between an image of Jews as both vulnerable people who must be protected and powerful people who must be defeated is now widespread. The scroll of Esther seems to have a happy ending. After near annihilation, the Jews of ancient Persia are saved. They witness the transformation from devastation to elation, from grief to festivity, They make a feast, send sweet gifts to one another, and take care of the poor. They have survived. But you wouldn't be wrong to feel unsettled as the story closes. The whole thrust of the narrative is that life is capricious and uncertain, that the whole world turns upside down again and again. Political upheaval, the Megillah seems to be warning us, is a condition of Jewish diaspora living. The relative calm of the past few decades for Jews in America has been the exception. The rule is turmoil. Our survival as a people depends on us learning how to navigate it with courage and with resiliency. Not the appropriated Esther, like Queen Esther, but not the appropriated Esther of the upside-down world of white Christian nationalism, but in the spirit of the real Esther, the Jewish Esther, the beautiful, courageous queen of our ancient sacred story. Shana Tova Tikatevu. May you all be inscribed for a good year to come. Amen.